So I am just so thrilled that I am able to spend time today with Mary Jo Cagle, who has accepted a new role with Cone Health as the regional president, as well as Mandy Eaton, who is our EVP of People and Culture. And ladies, we know that in healthcare, about 60% of the workforce are women, right? And we're proud of that. And we know that there's still some work that needs to be done as it relates to representation, right? So I am so thrilled to be able to talk to you all today to talk about your journey, talk about like where you've been, where you are now, and how we can continue to support women and continue to lift them up in an organization like you all have already done at Cone Health. All right. So I'm going to start off with just a couple of questions just so that people can get to know you a little bit better. So if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, how you ended up in healthcare, and kind of what that journey was like for you deciding on your career.
Well, so I knew I wanted to be a doctor since I was a little girl, 3 years old. But I'll tell you a funny story. When I was 3 and went into my family doctor's office, and of course he was male, and to me he seemed 10 feet tall, but I think he was at that time, he was well over 6 feet tall and had the big long white coat on. And I remember telling him, his name was Dr. Gwynn, Dr. Gwynn, I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up. And his nurse looked at him and looked at me and said, no, you mean you want to be a nurse. Now, there is absolutely nothing wrong with being a nurse. Thank God for them. But he scooped me up in his arms and he looked at her. And he always called her by her last name. He said, no, McCrory, she said she wanted to be a doctor. Now, that would have been in 1962. I remember that like it was yesterday. And, I was there for my annual exam, that you get when you're a little kid. And throughout my life, Dr. Gwynn would ask me, do you still want to be a doctor when you grow up? And I would say yes. And so he encouraged me and would tell me different things I needed to do about being a good student. At 3, he said, you need to learn your letters and your numbers. And you need to learn to read.
Right.
So, I went out and did what he said to do. But having some really strong male mentors who told me I could do it was so essential for me. All through my years as a student, having people who said, yes, you can do that, when there weren't a lot of female role models for me.
Right.
Was so important. And then, going to medical school in the South in the 80s.
I was just going to say, now, where were you?
I was in Birmingham, Alabama.
In Alabama, okay.
And so in my medical school class, there were 50 women out of a class of 150. And on the very first day of class, the anatomy professor gets up and said, oh my God, 50 women. That's the most we've ever had, and we don't know what to do with all of you.
I'm sure that's what he was thinking. We don't know what to do with all these women.
So I honestly would say that's my whole career, put in a nutshell. People saying, I don't know what to do with you. So I've either been the first or one of the first at most of the things I've done, right? So I guess I've helped people create the space for me to help them say, what are the possibilities? Because they've either had very few women or I've been the first. And so to help them look at what's possible.
Right.
That's been my career. And so sometimes you could say it's not been fair or it's not been easy. I could say all of those. I could tell the tough, hard stories, but I could also say I've created lots of possibility. And that's been done by working hard and succeeding beyond people's expectations.
So Mandy, tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, yeah. So I grew up in upstate New York, and probably my first introduction to healthcare and most impactful from a personal level was my grandmother, my grandma Ruby, and she's not with us today, but she was a big part of my life growing up as a child. I would get home from school, get off the school bus at her house, and spend the afternoon with her until my parents got off of work. My grandmother was a pediatric nurse, and I think I learned about healthcare through her personally, through her just deep sense of caring for people as individuals. She'd tell me stories about how she would get to take care of children in the hospital, and that was such a terrifying thing to be a child thinking about being in the hospital. But she made that a little bit more real for me. And when I got my first job in high school, I wanted to work in healthcare. I thought, because of my grandma Ruby, I got a job with a nursing home. And I was fortunate to have a friend whose mom had worked there and could get me a job. And it was an afternoon part-time kind of thing. And it was there that I got to see healthcare in action. And I could hear the stories from my grandma Ruby about things that she did in her work. But then I could actually feel and see it in the nursing home, two different spectrums of life, right? Mm-hmm. Pediatric nursing and geriatric care. And to see how hard the healthcare providers worked in that nursing home setting was just truly inspirational. And while I learned really early that I would never be a CNA or an LPN or an RN because I didn't have the intestinal fortitude for that type of work, I did know that my service to people was important to me. And so that's really how I got into healthcare. That's why I pursued a degree in healthcare when I went to school at UNC.
That's awesome. It's that caring spirit, right? That we can, if we use that, we can use it in any industry, but definitely in healthcare. The next question that I wanted to ask you all is, can you think of that moment in time when you realized that women's rights were different than men's rights?
So I can tell you a personal story. I'm not sure this was the first experience I had, but it was the first professional experience I had. It was one of my very first board meetings as a hospital leader. I was there just attending the board meeting, and a gentleman 3 or 4 people down from me leaned around the gentlemen that were between us over to me and said, "Hey, can you go ask the people in the kitchen to bring us some more sweet tea?" And I remember feeling very odd that I was being asked beyond these 3 or 4 other men to leave the board meeting and go help get something to drink, which I was happy to do, but remembered feeling the distinction there of, am I lesser than, am I less important in this meeting than other people? It was very uncomfortable, and it stuck with me many years now. It's stuck with me.
Absolutely. And you can probably visualize the moment what you had on and all of that in that moment.
Yeah. Everything, Kiva. Absolutely everything.
I just had so many flashbacks, man. So I have lots of memories. Growing up, I remember some uncles laughing about me wanting to be a doctor, and my dad vehemently defending. I would never have to say a word because my dad would say, "Oh no, she is going to be a doctor. You don't have to worry." I had a 6th grade teacher who laughed and say, "Oh honey, I wanted to be a doctor when I was a little girl too." So yeah, those experiences. I will tell you though, the most impactful one for me was when I was a medical student, a 3rd-year medical student. And I actually had a professor make a pass at me, which I rejected. And then I got a B in that course. Yes. And the professor actually wrote in his evaluation of me that I was a coquette.
Oh,
He didn't know if I knew how to behave appropriately.
wow.
And the dean of students called me in because I was president of my class and a high performer. And he called me in because he was embarrassed by the evaluation. And he
Mm-hmm.
felt like he needed to talk to me about it. And when he said it to me, I started laughing. And he said, "Why are you laughing?" And I told him the story that the person who had written that had actually made a pass at me, which I
Mm-hmm.
rejected, and that I was certain that that's where that arose from.
Wow.
And he asked me if I wanted to appeal the grade and go to the attending, and I said no, that I would accept the B rather than an A,
Mm-hmm.
and that I understood what my rights were. That a female medical student standing up against a male professor, and then I laughed and said B equals MD.
Right. That's right. That's
and
right.
and so here I am.
Absolutely. Here you are.
But that's when I went home and told my husband about it. I hadn't even told him about the past up to then because honestly, that was just something you dealt with at
Mm-hmm.
that point in time, and you just went on about your way. But that day, getting that grade with those comments was the day it just really slapped me in the face
Mm-hmm.
and said, "Yeah, my life is different than my male counterparts."
Yeah. So we all know that, we've all dealt with several, we could probably sit here and talk about all of those different instances that that we've recognized that rights were different. When I think about Mary Jo, with you and you stepping into this new role that's going to be the head of Cone Health now, right? As a woman, as the first woman to take that role and that responsibility. I have to ask you, when Terry called you, or when you and Terry had that discussion about it, where were you and what was your reaction?
Well, we were in my conference room here in my office suites.
Okay.
I will have to tell you, I was speechless, Kiva. I was completely speechless because at this point in my life, I had said, well, I was looking toward, honestly, retirement early to do some other things and maybe do some coaching and to travel some with my husband if we ever get to travel again.
Right.
And so I honestly was speechless. That was my reaction. And
Okay.
I had to reevaluate what I was going to do with my life and with this opportunity.
It's funny because when the announcement came out, it's like knowing that you were going to be in that role, it was just like, it was just joyous. You know what I mean? It was sad because we knew Terry was leaving and he was making, making life decisions. And then it turned to, wow, you mean we have a powerful, educated, smart, ready to take on the world woman in this role. And so it was really, really joyous for not only women, but for a lot of people in the organization. So I'm glad that you decided to reevaluate your future plans and stay with us for a little while longer.
Thank you, Kiva.
So, Mandy, I have to talk to you because you know that we talk about embedding, not talk about, we do embed DEI in everything we do. That's the only way that we're going to be successful.
Correct.
And so one of the things that stood out to me about this was the succession planning. And here, of course, we call it the leadership, the legacy building, right? And so if you can talk to us a little bit about what role that played and how that had an impact on how it had an impact on this particular situation and how it will evolve and continue to help people of all different backgrounds to be in different leadership roles?
Sure, that's a great question, Kiva. And as you're well aware, our goal is to ultimately, as a system, is to weave our DE&I practices throughout the entire employee life cycle for our employees. So that's from before folks even know they want to come work for us, from attraction and recruitment of diverse talent, all the way to our exit from the organization, because we want diversity and equity and inclusion to be just our way of being. And so almost 2 years ago now, I think it's been, we dedicated resources within our people and culture division to identify and develop our high potential talent. And our goal was to do that as early as possible. And we started that process at the very top of our organization. And we worked with all of our vice presidents to identify at least 2 potential internal successors for their roles. And that work has been the beginning of our formal succession planning work. As you referenced it, we call it leader legacy building. And during this time, something that I think Cone Health has done extraordinarily well is we've been able to identify high potential talent that's diverse. Mary Jo is a perfect example of this. And so, for example, in our work with our vice president level, you shared these statistics with us the other day. Over 60% of our internal successors identified for those positions at our vice president level and above are female. And about 35% of them are racially diverse. And so that plan for our leader legacy work is, the intent is to cascade that down to all levels of leadership, so that all of our leadership talent pipelines are being built. And then our ultimate goal is really for every member of Cone Health, no matter what your role is, to have an individualized development plan that's unique to you for your own career path, whatever that looks like for you.
So we talked a little bit about, just because when you all introduced yourselves and talked about who inspired you and kind of how you got to where you are now, a lot of that was women supporting women, but it was also men supporting women, right? So it takes all of us to work together to do that. So Mary Jo, you are the executive ambassador for our Women Inspiring Women Network Group. Can you tell us why you chose to do that, and what have you seen that has been, because of that, things that you have seen that have been implemented or that have helped progress or promote the advancement of women?
So my first CEO was a woman who actually saw something in me that led her to believe that I could be a chief medical officer. And she offered me my first administrative role. I talked to her right before the announcement was made, to let her know and to thank her for her faith in me. And so she's probably the reason why I wanted to be our administrative sponsor for Women Inspiring Women, because someone once saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And she also helped develop a pathway for me to grow. And that's what I think Women Inspiring Women can do. It provides a network for growth.
Yes, that's something that we all need, and that women, we need to be here for each other, and we need to do that in a number of ways. So this is a question that I know I've struggled with at certain times, and I want to know if you all do. So when we talk about the imposter syndrome, are you all familiar with that topic?
Oh yeah.
So I would really like, Mandy, if we could just kind of talk about that a little bit, and how, not necessarily if we have it, because I think at some point in our career we all experience a little bit of that, right? But can you share anything that you've done, or anything that you've helped anyone do to kind of dismiss that and just help them move forward and not have that be a barrier?
I think, imposter syndrome is one of those things that everyone experiences, whether they're, no matter what their gender is or their background. And so when you put it in that context, it helps to understand that you're not alone in feeling it. Lots of people think it. I do think what's challenging, though, is in a lot of organizations, I think that there are biases about certain individuals in the work environment. Women sometimes have biases against them in their work environments, particularly when it comes to taking roles that have been historically dominated by men. So, sometimes women can be labeled in ways that are based on stereotypes, and they certainly don't help in those perceptions of being an imposter. For example, sometimes women can be pegged with stereotypes like they're not strategic, or they're not assertive enough, or maybe they're too valuable in the role that they're currently placed in. And some cases, I think we're perceived as different than men because we aren't the loudest or the strongest voice in the room. And so I think when it comes to the imposter syndrome, there's work to be done on ourselves individually, but I also think it's really up to organizations to challenge our assumptions, particularly about women in the workplace. And I think where it's possible, we should work to remove those labels and those traditional conventions, because I feel like these perceptions and these norms are really difficult to overcome, but it is necessary to push past them.
Phenomenal. And one of the ways that I know that I've experienced you all doing just that is speaking up, right? When things I've witnessed you all do that openly in meetings when someone's talking, or when a woman is talking, right? And we hear the mansplaining, that's happening, right? And so just being able to stop that and say, wait a minute, let's let her finish her thought, or let's get someone else's opinion about that. So I think that in order for us to do that at the organizational level, we're going to have to step into it and take it head on, and have the courage to stand up when we know that that we need to. And so we want to inspire women to really take the opportunities that are there for us, and just really to lead like no other, right? And just step into it and do that. Over time, when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, there's a fatigue that happens, right? Where organizations or individuals really get tired of hearing about helping the underrepresented, right? Or the women, or the minority. They're like, okay, what else are we gonna do? Why are we still talking about that? I want us to I want to hear your opinions about embedding DEI in everything we do. What would you like for that to look like at Cone Health in the next 3 years?
So, Kiva, the most important thing to me is that we have the very best talent at the table. Okay. And if we're excluding a piece of the pie of the talent, then we're not looking at the very best talent. So women make up 50% of the talent pool. And so if I look at a leadership team that's not at least 50% women, then that tells me, gee, I've cheated myself out of the talent. Mm-hmm. If in this community, nearly 50% of the community is ethnically diverse, and I look at the table and 50% of the leadership team's not ethnically diverse, then that tells me I haven't looked at 50% of the talent pool.
Right.
Just by the makeup of the community, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, I'm just talking statistically, right?
Mm-hmm. These are facts, right?
These are just facts.
Right.
So this is not giving preferential treatment. This is just saying I want the best talent, and to look at to make certain that we're getting the best talent, then the talent needs to represent what we have in the community, or else we've cut out part of the talent pool. Mm-hmm. if I'm looking at my talent pool and it's 80% white male, that does not represent my talent pool. I've kept some out of the talent pool. Conversely, if my leadership team were only 20% white male, I would have cut them out of the talent pool.
Yeah.
So I've got to look and say, what talent have I cut out of my talent pool if I am going to get the very best talent we can get on him?
And the best way for us to make it so is to be intentional, like Mary Jo said, about ensuring that when we hire for open positions, that we're reviewing a diverse slate of candidates. And when we're doing interviews, that we look around and make sure that the people who look different than us are part of that interview process, and that those folks are also weighing in on the selection of new hires.
I really want to thank you all. I have a couple of more, what I'm calling my lightning rod questions. And I just want each of you to answer. It doesn't matter who goes first. And it's 4 of them, so we'll just get through them quickly. So, all right. The first one would be your favorite way to practice self-care. Because we know that women will put other people before themselves all the time, right? And we will do that, and we will continue to do that. So what do you do to one thing or favorite thing that you do to practice self-care?
So go to my beach house on the weekends and unplug.
You know, I say the same thing. I don't have a beach house, but I love being near the water, and I just find it to be very restorative. So any chance I get, I like to be near the water. And of course, when the weather's nice, I certainly like to be on the water and in it if I can. I also have 2 rescued Spanish water dogs, and they really love the water. And I really love spending time with them. So it's a pretty perfect setup we have.
One thing that you would advise women to stop doing?
I think to your point, Kiva, we should stop putting everything before ourselves. I think we act as caretakers, and we can tend to put everyone else's needs before our own. And I just have to say we should stop doing that, and we should stop sacrificing our own personal time to tend to other people's needs. I think that we should stop cutting corners on our own wellness journey, which I'm personally responsible for, to make time to do what other people need me to do. And I think we should write ourselves into our calendars every day.
Stop being the nice girl all the time.
Okay.
We think we have to be the nice, sweet one all the time. Give yourself permission to be firm and tough if you need to.
Your favorite guilty pleasure that always perks you up?
At 2:30 or 3 o'clock, Diet Dr. Pepper.
I love to binge watch television. I never have time to watch television, but when I do, I love to watch Law and Order or crime, mystery shows, anything like that. I could just watch for hours.
All right, one last question, and this is kind of a bookwormy one, but a book that helped change your career trajectory?
I've already mentioned it once. Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I think off the top of my head, I would say Dare to Lead by Brené Brown.
Okay.
She's an incredible author. She talks in the book about the power of being vulnerable in leadership. And I think when I read her book and realized that I could not only be myself, but I could also be very human and failing and still be a good leader. In fact, I could be a better leader by doing those things. Something actually clicked for me, and I think my whole trajectory as a leader changed.
Well, I am here again. I want to thank you all for both of you for taking the time to speak with me and to provide some advice and guidance and help people understand your journey, and people can see themselves in your journey. I just encourage you to just keep doing what you're doing and keep helping us advance the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Really, really, really appreciate you and look so forward to the future, what the future brings for us.